Hello, everybody. This is Symphony News Network, and I'm your host, Daniel Dibaba. In our today's program, I will speak with Dr. Trevor Trueman, the Oromia Support Group chairperson from United Kingdom, about OSG's recent report on human rights situation in Ethiopia. We'll also talk about a conference that is being organized by the Oromia Support Group and Oromo Conversation that's going to take place next week on May 3rd. And we'll also talk about a planned book by Dr. Trevor. So without further ado, I'll take you to Dr. Trevor. Dr. Trevor, welcome to Infinite News Network again. Dr. Trevor, as you all might know, has been a very dedicated human rights advocate and human rights researcher for over 3 decades. He has been working closely with the Oromo human rights, and he is the chairperson of Oromia Support Group, which is based in the United Kingdom. And they frequently release human rights situation report on Ethiopia and in particular on the Oromo people. Welcome to Infinite News Network, Dr. Trevor.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's lovely to be here again.
All right, so let's delve into our today's program. So you recently released OSG's report number 69 on the situation of human rights on Ethiopia. But before we get into this report, I would like you to speak about the upcoming conference that's going to take place next week. What is it about, and who will participate? Who are the keynote speakers, and what are the topic? And so, if you enlighten us about that.
Great. As you know, we've been holding conferences organised by the Oromo Conversation team for the last 3-4 years. And this is probably about the 7th or 8th conference. And we've been trying, the whole idea of the Oromo Conversation series of conferences is to have a civilized discussion without too much in the way of, without any negative criticism, but just positive criticism, so that people can speak to each other in a civilized way without fear of being chastised or ridiculed, or without the nastiness that sometimes follows with conversations about the Oromo people and how best to solve the current crises. As you know, 2 or 3 years ago, several prominent Oromo formulated the national consensus, the consensus of Oromo national interests. And the conferences more recently have been aimed at deciding how to, what next steps to take, how to realize what the Oromo people want. We are fairly confident that we know what Oromo want in terms of their national interests. There is a consensus on that, but it's how to get there. We've been engaged with political parties and other people over the last few years. At this conference, we have a representative from OLA for the first time in a while, the Oromo Liberation Army, and it's been really good that we've managed to get a spokesman from OLA to speak to us. Also, we have plans to hear from the OLF Elders Committee, although the speaker for that will be in Australia, so we're a little bit concerned about whether he will be able to make it. And Soreti Kadir, who runs the Oromo Democratic Revolutionary Party, she's based in Nairobi. So that will be a refreshing new perspective to take on how the Oromo should achieve what they want. And a prominent human rights activist and lawyer in Kenya, Kano Galichajilo, who used to report for the Oromo Legacy Leadership and Advocacy Association on human rights abuses in Ethiopia. So he's well attuned to the human rights situation in Oromia and Ethiopia in general. And his is a new voice for us to hear at the Oromo conversation. But a large part of our meetings is to encourage dialogue between the audience and the presenters. So about half of the meeting will be the presentations, and the other half will be hearing from the audience and then asking questions to the presenters. The conference will be held in Afan Oromo, which will encourage people to speak in their own tongue rather than an imported language, which is, although many Oromo speak really excellent English, and it will encourage everybody to have a chance of saying exactly what they want to say in their own language, which is great. And the conference takes place this coming Saturday on the 3rd of May, and it begins at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time, which is 4 p.m. in the UK, 5 p.m. Central Europe, and 6 p.m. in Nairobi and in Oromia. So, and if anybody has difficulty finding the Zoom link for the conference, just send me an email at Oromia OSG, at talktalk.net. So OSG at talktalk.net, and I will gladly send you the flyer and the Zoom link for the conference. We don't aim to solve all Oromia's problems in any way by having these conferences, but we hope to air views so that eventually, when the time comes, we will be able to implement what we've discovered to be the Oromo national interest, the consensus document from a couple of years ago. And the fall of Abiy Ahmed, nobody knows when that will happen, but it's increasingly unstable, the situation over there, as you can tell from the latest OSG report. So we should be prepared in terms of what we want to happen, how we want it to take place. So this is how the conference is geared this time. We're asking all the presenters to give their ideas, their perspectives on what should be done to steer the Oromo out of the current crises, and what are the next steps after Abiy Ahmed falls, as he inevitably will.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So who are the expected audiences who would benefit from this conference? You mentioned that it would be held in Afan Oromo. Are you also going to, are the presenters going to present in English as well? Who are the expected audiences? And so you mentioned that you have previously held several conferences coordinated by the Oromo Conversation. What does the impact look like?
Well, it's to spread information and encourage dialogue among Oromo people, and hence it is in Afan Oromo. And all of the audience will be contacts of the Oromo Conversation team. This includes Oromo bodies, organizations, such as the Oromo Professionals Group, the Oromo Studies Association we send to, and all of the people who get the Oromia Support Group reports, and community organizations spread across the planet, but mainly in America and Canada. So we're aiming to get as broad an audience as possible, but obviously if it's in Afan Oromo, it will be an Oromo audience, rather than trying to preach to British politicians or American politicians, for example. There is a place for doing that sort of conference, which I think the Oromo Global Forum, which will be revitalized shortly, and that will aim to promote solutions to the Oromo crises to a wider audience, not only Oromo. But the Oromo conversation is aimed primarily at Oromo people, to inform and to encourage civilized dialogue. We've been doing this, as I say, for several years now, and it's been very successful. We've had many good and fruitful conversations, and as I say, this gave rise to the document on Oromo national interests a couple of years ago. But now we want to be looking more towards the implementation of that and how we can go about that.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So let's get back to the Oromia Support Group report number 69. There are a number of key findings in that report. You mentioned that the Ethiopian government has killed more than 6,419 up to the time the report came out on April 10th. And since then, today is April 27th, Finfinne News Network has been receiving a number of weekly indiscriminate killing of civilians. In the last 2 weeks, we have reported more than 12 people killed by the Ethiopian government. So the killing is ongoing. And what are your key findings from this report?
Is that we've got so accustomed to since Abiy Ahmed came to power. The Oromia Support Group has produced 20 reports since 2018. We had a gap, as you know, for several years, but then because of the atrocities due to Abiy Ahmed's actions, and because of his targeting of Kero in the early years, we started again in June or July 2019, and this is the 20th report we've written since that time. We were recording for 20 years from 1992 to 2012, when the figure of 4,500 killings by the TPLF was recorded. And over that 20-year period, as I say, that was 4,500. But in the 7 years since Abiy Ahmed's been in power, we've now got 6,500 killings, mostly due to his forces, increasingly so the militias as well as the ENDF now, and several hundred killed by Fano groups, which he armed and empowered, especially during the war with Tigray. And the Oromo people now, especially the ones in Shoa and East Wallaga and Horoguduru, the zones that surround Amhara region, they are being attacked not only by the ENDF, by local militias, but by these Fano groups, which are now based in those zones. They're not only based in the Amhara region, they are based in Wolaga and in Shoa, where they're committing acts of ethnic cleansing against the Oromo, and also in Benishangul Gumuz region in Metakel zone against the Gumuz people as well as the Oromo inhabitants there. So we've seen that as a continuation of what Abiy Ahmed's been doing since 2018 or late 2018, but also over the last 6 months or so, we've seen increasingly the amount of damage that he's doing to the population, not only with killing, but in terms of the economy and in terms of the extortion that the Oromo people are being subjected to. And people are being taxed for all sorts of reasons, not only general tax, the Gonofa tax, but feeding the army, clothing the army, ammunition, and I'm reading reports today of people in Western Shoa being told to supply guns, to buy guns and take them to the local authorities in order to get their relatives released from prison. And health insurance, that's another one that's been particularly enforced over the last 6 months. And we're hearing this from Kero Bilisuma Oromo, which I'm sure you have information from. And it seems that throughout Oromia region, people are being impoverished by these cruel taxes. And if they don't pay, they're liable to be shot or imprisoned. Their children are being taken for military conscription, either into the ENDF or to these local militia, which are burgeoning all over the region. And if they refuse, they're either expected to pay thousands of birr to get their sons and daughters released, or they're conscripted into the army, or they're imprisoned because of refusing to send their children. It's Terry Osterbo wrote in Addis Standard earlier this year about the rule by lawlessness, which is exactly as it has become in Ethiopia now. These local militia are poorly trained and even more poorly disciplined, and they take out personal vengeance against people they don't like. They imprison people for spurious reasons, including these ridiculous taxes that are being applied all over the place. And they are, well, I'll give you an example. One of the things in the report was an account given by a 10-year-old boy about a man with a uniform and a gun coming to his home in West Wolaga and shooting dead his mother and two of his sisters and a 5-year-old girl from next door. And this little boy had interviewed, and he wasn't able to say if it was ENDF, he wasn't able to say if it was local militia or whether it was Fano. The amount of lawlessness that's going on is unfathomable, and it's very difficult to analyse, but this is what we attempt to do in the Oromo Support Group report. And it does seem that most of the killings are being taken place due to the activities of ENDF, but increasingly so these local militia and the Ganacha Sirna, this grotesque distortion of Gadar authorities, which Shimelis Abdissa made by proclamation in 2022. So it's It's a situation, I know we keep saying this is worse than ever before, but this unfortunately is the way it's become. In the times of the Derg, we said this was worse than Haile Selassie. In the times of the EPRDF, we said this is worse than the Derg. But presently, what is happening to the Oromo people is worse than I've experienced. And those figures that I quoted at the start of our interview in terms of the number of people killed speak volumes. 6,500 in 7 years compared to 4,500 in 20 years under Abiy Ahmed. And this is the tip of the iceberg. We probably get, well, certainly less than 20%, and I suspect less than 10% of the killings are actually recorded by the Oromo support group. And you see on the screen here, we don't know where these incidents took place, but it looks as though the one where the ENDF boot is applied to the back of the neck of this young Oromo in pushing his head into a stream of running water. And this probably took place near to Finfinny, judging by the caption on the Facebook entry that recorded it. So, yes, it's all happening, and it's worse than I've experienced previously.
Does it look like the Ethiopian government trains its military and police force about human rights, ethics at all? It looks like wherever they appear, they commit almost similar kind of abuses, and it's a kind of pattern. It's not any isolated incident. We haven't seen the government taking any action against its own forces committing this kind of abuses and crimes. Do you think the government encourage this, or this is the military and the police are doing this on themselves, on their own? What do you think? Do you think the government is training its forces any military ethics, and do they understand what the constitution says, and if the people have any right to human right in survival and peace?
No. The militias and the ENDF are acting without any regard to human rights at all, without any regard to the Ethiopian constitution, and without any regard to the conventions that Ethiopia has signed up to with the United Nations. So there's complete impunity. You can do whatever you like. In fact, Abiy Ahmed told his troops, you can do what you like in terms of robbing people, killing people, in order to drain the ocean to kill the fish. And this is all part of the same process. And he's on record as having said, you can do whatever you like and you won't be punished for it. This is to the armed forces. And as I say, absolute impunity, and they've been instructed to abuse human rights. It's not a question of rogue elements not being punished. They've actually been instructed to do this. And you can see this with the militias now. The local militias are being told by the Kore Negenya at regional level, district level, and clan level, that all of these secret committees have militia underneath them, whom they instruct to directly to damage the Oromo people.
So in your report, you included while Nero fuels Rome burners. And who are you referring to? Is that about Abiy and his policies? Can you highlight about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said.
And you report there is a saying that Nero fiddles while Rome burns.
This is contrasting the vanity projects of Abiy Ahmed, which presumably are funded by the Oromo people and the other peoples of Ethiopia, in addition to money he's getting from the United Arab Emirates. But yeah, the corridor projects in Addis Ababa, in Finfinne, and in other major towns and cities, and the new airport at Bishoftu. That's what, $7.8 billion is going to. It's so-called modernizing and building huge accommodation where the electricity supply and the water supply isn't there, but they look very fancy. And you see these streets in Finfinne, which are lined with electric lamps and fountains, while people are being kicked out of their homes to make way for these without compensation, without warning often. And this is similar to the Roman Emperor Nero, who, when Rome was burning, he was playing his violin, playing his fiddle. And Abiy Ahmed is so out of touch with the results of his projects and his plans, and it seems to exist in a vacuum of information. It belies understanding. I cannot see how he can justify to himself what is going on there. And the same with the people amongst the Oromo who support him, like Shimelis Abdissa. And unfortunately, there are lots of other Oromo who are lining their own pockets at the expense of the Oromo population because they're associated with him. Former leaders of the OLF, things who are now advisors or ministers or whatever to Abiy Ahmed. It's very, very disappointing. There's a human rights activist from the Sidamo, Seum Humeso, who I worked with in the 90s, but now he's a university lecturer in Hawassa, I believe. And this is all very disappointing stuff. Len Shabati, who I campaigned with in America about human rights abuses against the Oromo, and he was hoping to become the next ambassador to the USA, but fortunately that didn't come to fruition. But he was, I believe, the ambassador to Saudi Arabia for a while. But it's very disappointing. I remember writing about the disappearance of Lencho's brother, Lencho Bati's brother, Yosef Bati, under the TPLF, and as both bemoaning the human rights record of Meles Zenawi. But the human rights record of his present boss is even worse. It's discouraging and very disappointing. The time will come when people have to reckon with their record. They will be called to account what they have done, what they've permitted to have been done against their people. And without being too punitive, obviously we'll want to encourage a situation where people can live in peace together. But we cannot allow complete impunity for abuses against the peoples of Ethiopia, not just the Oromo, but all of the peoples. And I think a time will come when there is a reckoning.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So, Elaine Chobati and many others among the OLF leadership are currently aligned with with this government. And Haile Gonfa was once a member of OLF, and now he is one of the security officers of the government. There are quite a few others who have been. Len Cholata, for example, was also one of the top leaders of the OLF, and now is aligned with the current government. Some leaders do not have persistence and really qualities that stands, and we have seen some align with this government, irrespective of what it is doing to our people, for whom the OLF has been struggling for over half a century right now. So the actions and decisions of some is really questionable and emboldens Abiy Ahmed and to do whatever he wants to stay in power. It's kind of like formation of a group in power and do whatever they will to benefit themselves and without any regard to the human rights situation and whether the Oromo people's long-standing demands have been met. And so, thank you for pointing out that. And so, continue with the human rights report. What stands out to you? What are the most memorable incidences in this report and in the report that you have compiled under when Abiy Ahmed is in power?
Early on, it was the targeting of the youth, the Kero and Kare, who were the instruments that enabled Abiy Ahmed to come to power. And he began in his first year saying, this is the group that's more powerful than any armed group, and therefore they should be the number one target. And we've seen ever since then, it's still continuing. The young people are the ones who bear the brunt of his killing squads, really. And this has continued, but we've also seen now with the growth of the local militias, how the whole Oromo population has been targeted economically as well as in terms of their human rights. And the other thing, of course, is the effect of Fano. The amount of hatred amongst the Fano groups which kill Oromo civilians in their acts of ethnic cleansing. That has astonished me. I wasn't aware of the degree of racist hatred and the supremacism of some Amhara who believe that the Oromo are inferior and are animals, basically. I failed to appreciate that during the years of the EPRDF. So that has been something that's really stood out to me. So Abiy's targeting of the youth and the current lawlessness and the dog-eat-dog society that Abiy Ahmed has allowed to develop, and the growth of this racist, inter-ethnic hatred of the Amhara for the Oromo. These are the three things that really stand out to me. And I think we must not respond to the Amhara Oromo situation by being the same, by assuming every Amhara is out to kill us. We must educate people and reassure them that we're not out to take over, we're not out to make them suffer at the hands of an Oromo, a real Oromo government. People call this an Oromo government, but it's nothing like an Oromo government. It does not represent Oromo interests whatsoever. And this is just an excuse used by Fano for their atrocities against the Oromo people. We must reassure and educate and show that what the Oromo want is equality for all in Ethiopia. In whatever political structure is decided, nobody should suffer because of who they are and who their parents are and where they live. Everybody should be treated equally.
Thank you for that, Dr. Trevor. So in this report, you also widened your scope. You included human rights abuses in Afar and many other places, including Benishangul Gumuz. So what are the human rights situation in those and other regions in Ethiopia look like?
Well, I'm no expert on the other regions. I included the killing of Afar people by Djibouti security services, security forces rather, because I was told about it. I've tried to include abuses in Amhara region to some extent, and also Benishangul Gumuz, again, because nobody else is talking about it much. And we do have access to experts on Benishangul Gumuz region in the form of Temeskin Gemetru, who's now in the USA. And I've relied heavily on information from him, and also Daniel Gamada, in terms of human rights abuses there and elsewhere. It's not only the Oromo who are targeted, but they are targeted for the majority of the abuse because they are the biggest population. But I will report on human rights abuses anywhere. Obviously, during the Tigray War, I did not have the bandwidth to cover that adequately, although we have mentioned total figures and this sort of thing. But it was beyond the scope of OSG to cover the atrocities in that genocidal campaign. I've reported a little bit about the conclusions of experts on genocide regarding the war in Tigray. But I cannot pretend to know as much about the other regions as I do about Oromia. In fact, the coverage of Oromia is patchy. It's only with the information obtained from one or two people that we've got such a lot about Guji in the last report. Guji, Barana, we get very little information from there. We're getting a little more from central Ethiopia, from Arsi, but we still get a lot of information from the west, from the different zones of Wolaga and also Shoa, because A, that is where a lot of the abuses are occurring, and B, that's where we have better contacts. But it's universal throughout Ethiopia.
In terms of the global geopolitical situation right now, there are a number of changes UK government frequently changed in the last few years. Now a new government is in power. And when it comes to the United States, President Trump took his second term in January this year, and it looks like there is some change in policies and outlook about the political situation in Ethiopia. It looks like there is some kind of normalization and support to this government, and that looks like it's with disregard to the human rights situation. What is your take on that? Have the world changed and they are ignoring whatever is happening to the population, and are not basing the financial support and shoring up of, supporting the Abiy government contingent on its human rights record? What is your view about that? And is there a shift in the political paradigm from the Western nations?
Yes, there is certainly a shift to the right. You can read this by just looking at refugee policy in Europe and in America. I think ever since the atrocities associated with the Second World War, after that, there was a revulsion, a universal revulsion about the awful human rights abuses that occurred then. And that resulted in a big swing to a universalism and respect for human rights. We had the establishment of the UN and the conventions on human rights, and the conventions for refugees. But we've seen that eroded. It's been chipped away everywhere. It's not just China and Russia. It's happening in Europe with the basically racist attitude to refugees. And it's happening now, we see more with Donald Trump, where he's brazenly espousing anti-human rights rhetoric and racist rhetoric. It's terrible that a person like that should have been supported by the majority of the American population. And there was a lot of people horrified when he got in, and justifiably so, as now we see. And in terms of his effect on world aid and his cutting of USAID and anything to do with human rights in America and respect for people, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act will not be reinstated. We won't see the sycophantic support to Abiy Ahmed that was there. And for this, I'm very grateful. I think Africa as a whole must stand on its own feet rather than be supported with aid from outside. A fairer trading relationship with the world is necessary. So there has to be substantial reform at the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the world financial structure, basically. But with the aid, a lot of the aid that went into Africa went straight back to the countries that provided the aid because of who they employed to administer the aid. The relationship with Africa has never been benevolent from Europe and from North America. So the more distancing there is, I'm pleased to see. China has benefited Africa more than well, it's benefiting Africa more than America and Europe by infrastructure projects, which is a shameful state of affairs considering the absence of respect for human rights in China. Africa has to develop its own morals and its own economy, and if that means severing ties with the West or reducing ties with the West, then so be it. I think Africa has the potential to be a powerhouse for the world, and especially in terms of its resources and the people and the energy and the youngness of the whole continent. I've got every hope that the Oromo will be part of that resurgence of Africa in the future. It is very easy to be despondent about what's going on, but it's all a swinging pendulum, and it will swing back in the direction of human rights, respect for human rights, and equality for the people in Africa compared to the rest of the world. It will happen. And I believe the Oromo will be a big part of that because of their inherent respect for equality, human rights, fairness, and respect for the environment. The Oromo have such a lot going for them in terms of their DNA. I don't mean biological DNA, I mean in terms of their societal DNA. The whole Gada system involves respect for other people and treating people as equals. And this is the basis of my hope for the Oromo in the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. You mentioned a lot about the current American government as well as European economic support to Africa that it doesn't usually produce. They espoused goal and prosperity, especially among the people. Usually the government, those in power, expropriate that money and use it for their own goals. And the money that goes into African nations are all mostly spent in the capital, and they use it for the vanity projects you've been stating. And so the general population doesn't benefit from it. And usually why people think China's support to Africa is more producing impact. It's usually, it almost takes place across the country. And especially in Ethiopia, China had been involved in road development, and road is one of the infrastructure that is still very poor in African nations, including Ethiopia. And China has been playing a good role in improving road system in African countries, especially in Ethiopia. I've seen them, road that have been muddy for more than a century. They came in and transformed it. That happened in the west of the country and in many parts of the country. That's why people think China is doing better than the West. I think if they, including the United States and European countries, focus on develop and conducting their developmental support in rural areas in the country, the impact will be more visible, and it can compete with the development activities of China and the other Asian country and forest countries. Yeah, you rightly mentioned that AGOA is still in effect. So that's the sanction pulling out of AGOA countries like Ethiopia because of the human rights situation is still in effect. But um, I've seen the Secretary of State Marco Rubio having kind of normalizing relationship with the Ethiopian government. Of course, under Biden administration as well, Abiy was invited to Washington D.C. At some point. They were watching the World Cup or some sport. I remember that. So it's not only the current government. The previous government also to some extent leaned on Abiy's human rights. Status or whatever he's doing right now. So there is a silence and a disregard because it's not happening to us, the people in the West. And Abiy, as long as it's sweet, he is, his wish, his desire to stay in power indefinitely by doing whatever he wants. He's not gonna, reform the military or improve the human rights situation. I think it's the same thing elsewhere in Africa. If you picked up any country and focused on their human rights record, I think there are many people, many countries in Africa are similar. And so Africa is poor economically, still a lot need to be improved. And the human rights record and the greed of the people who come to power and how they treat the people who are the constituent, the population, it's all similar across the countries in the African continent. And um, so it's a lot. It's very difficult to bring about a change in one country and expect something improves. I think the situation is similar across the African continent. And I observed that some military leadership of countries like I think Tunisia last week were in Finfinne and visiting the Air Force, and they were talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and cooperation, military cooperation with Ethiopia. And I thought African countries also are the same. It's like the birds of the same feather fly together, and they do the same thing in their own country, and they support each other. I think that's what is going on right now in Africa. And when it comes to the Western nations, I believe they should stick to the focus and the value of morals, human rights. Human rights is a core issue, and the Western nations are known for protecting the vulnerable population, the vulnerable people, and also making emphasis on that and making the economic support that they provide to developing countries contingent on their human rights records and human rights improvement. And I think they should continue to do that. Otherwise, Africa, and if there is no check and balance in the global order, the African continent, those in power will continue to eat the people, the poor people. So thank you very much for your time today. And in the end, I would like to take a few moments and talk about the books that you are planning to write and the advocacy activities that you have been engaged over last 3 decades. And what do you feel is the impact? And is your report reaching the policymaker across the world? And if if you are submitting your report to the UN, the policymakers in Europe and across the world?
The systems of knowledge and power are stacked against human rights. And I have made great efforts in the past, speaking at the UN and this sort of thing at the Human Rights Council. We still do submit statements to the UN Human Rights Council. We had a lot of engagement with the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, ICRI, a couple of years ago. And there are reasons to be despondent because it doesn't seem to make much difference. And I don't think we will see an improvement in the activities of power brokers on the planet until there is more priority given to respect for human rights internationally. And the silence of the world against Israel and its genocide in Gaza is astounding. That has been a huge disappointment to me and an indication of how power is in the wrong hands on the planet. But as I say, this is a pendulum that will swing back. Whether this year, next year, or next decade, it will swing back. We will see as countries learn that respect for human rights results in development and prosperity, then that will start to gain traction. And it isn't the whole of Africa that's in a bad state. There are countries where there are signs of good things happening. Senegal, Namibia, Botswana. There are places where progress is apparent. And I believe that we will see this happen in the Horn of Africa too. My own belief, because of the nature of the Oromo people, is that this will be Oromo-led, but we will see. And the reports that I write are there. It's a physical record that can be referred to and people can rely on them. And this is my contribution, if you like. And the book that I'm planning, it's very much in the planning stage at the moment. That will be just part of that process. So don't lose hope. That's the thing. As Noam Chomsky, as I often say this, he said that if you say there is no hope, you guarantee there is no hope. So I'm a great believer in what he says there. We have to hope for a better future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. So when do we expect your books to come out? Go on.
It'll be about 1 year, I think.
So thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. For our watchers, this has been Feminist Network with Dr. Trevor Trueman, the chairman of Oromia Support Group. He has been human rights advocate for over 30 years, mostly reporting on the Oromo human rights and the human rights situation in Ethiopia. Till next time, thank you very much for watching. Bye.